I'm dying. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, Bean here, and today we're going to be going through my wrap-up for our fall-time readathon. Now, I didn't manage to get through all of the books that I wanted to, however, I did make it through several, and I replaced a couple and DNF'd a couple, and it was a good time though. I read quite a bit this month. I was able to get through a total of 12 books this month. I will talk about most of them, I believe, here in the wrap-up. And yeah, so let's get going. And the first prompt that we had was to read a retelling, and I chose to read Sherwood by Meagan Spooner. Now, this one I did end up giving a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I really did enjoy this. This is the second book by Meagan Spooner. The first one is Hunted, which is Beauty and the Beast retelling. This is a Robin Hood retelling. I don't feel like I see a lot of those that aren't films. And so this was a very interesting story that followed the Lady Marian, who is Robin's betrothed, and he does not come home from the wars. In fact, Robin Hood dies in the war, and she is just heartbroken by this. And so, in order to encourage her people, she ends up masquerading as Robin Hood and attempts to bring some justice to the world. I thought this was a very interesting book. It was well written. I really enjoyed it. I got into it and I couldn't get out. Marian is very interesting. I love the way that she's depicted. She's depicted as a very tall girl who has more masculine features, which is the only reason she's able to pull off this stunt. And I also enjoy, this is a enemies to friends type of thing. And it's very interesting. The sheriff of Nottingham kind of takes a little bit of a backseat to this one, and she is instead kind of battling more against the oppression that all of the people are being subjected to. And it also talks about being a girl in these times and how little she's actually able to do, but how she's still respected in a way, and she can't even always tell the merry men who she is, because are they going to respect her? She is a girl in medieval times. So I love this story. I think this is a very good one, and I would highly recommend it. The second prompt that we had was to read a book with a spooky cover, and I chose to read Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. This is the first book in a new series, and let me tell you guys, I am low-key obsessed with this book. It was so good. If you can't see, this cover in and of itself is spooky but beautiful, and Gideon is such an interesting main character. I couldn't put this book down. It was full of action, adventure, sass, sarcasm, and lesbian necromancers. So what's not to like here? I do find this book a bit hard to summarize just because quite a bit happens, but it's still really well done. This is a bit of a sci-fi fantasy sort of book. The world that this takes place in is a solar system with 9 different planets, and each planet has its own house. So our main character, Gideon the Ninth, is from the 9th house, which is the house of the dead and the deceased. So a lot of necromancers, obviously. And basically, this follows Gideon, who is not a necromancer. She is a swordswoman, and a brilliant one at that. So she is hired by the people who kind of run the joint. Their daughter, who is Harrowhawk, who is the necromancer of the age, or of the planet, and she is hired as their bodyguard. Downside, they despise each other, absolutely loathe each other. However, hilarity ensues, and there's a lot of good times happening in this book. The ending of this book broke my heart. It broke my heart into little pieces. The only warnings I can really give you for this book is if you don't like violence, you don't like swearing, you don't like blood, guts, and gore, then please don't read this. It is a dark story, and it is amazing. I absolutely love this, and I do not want to wait another year for the next one. So please, can I have it sooner? I really want it sooner. The next one, I believe, is called Harrow the Ninth, which follows Harrowhawk. But I will say that there's several different battles in this story. The main battle in this book, I'm so used to fantasy books having like a chapter or two of the battle and that's it. This one lasted like 100 pages. Like, it was a solid action scene that just kept going. So it's not one of those that wraps up nice and pretty, but it is so well done, and I cannot recommend this enough, in case you can't tell by me going off on a rant on this one. Needless to say, 5 out of 5. The next prompt that we had was to reread a book, and I chose to read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. This is the second book in the Harry Potter series, and this is, yes, the Hufflepuff edition, which I am a proud Hufflepuff, so go Puffs. We did read this one and we did do a discussion on it. It went up on Halloween, so I will link that down below. I'm not going to talk too much into this. As a quick summary, for me, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets is actually my least favorite Harry Potter book. It's not that I dislike it. I give it a 4.5 out of 5, but I just feel like it doesn't progress a lot of the plot, and the diary is always just kind of glazed over as far as any of the future books go. So this isn't my favorite. Look at our video down below to hear more about it, but I absolutely love this book still because it's Harry Potter and I love Harry Potter. So our fourth prompt is the first one that I ended up switching out. The prompt was to read a mystery or a thriller, and I was going to read Pop Goes the Weasel by M.J. Arledge, but I ended up reading Hercule Poirot's Christmas by Agatha Christie. So many of you might know that I am working my way through all of the Agatha Christie books in the Hercule Poirot series. I was hoping to finish them all this year, but after realizing there's 40 of them, I'm going to be waiting. This is approximately, I think this is about halfway through. I think this is number 20. And this was another really fun Hercule Poirot story. I'm going to do a large wrap-up of these at the end of the year, so look out for that in Bookmas. So that will be coming up next month. Sorry if my camera angle changed. I got a phone call, so. The next prompt that we had was to read a book about witches, or a book with witches in it, and I ended up reading The Dark Lord Clementine by Sarah Jean Horwitz. This is a middle grade novel that I had forgotten that I needed to read. I did a review for this one up on my blog. Overall, I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5. This was a super fun story that follows the Dark Lord Clementine, who is the daughter of the current Dark Lord of the realm, and all of a sudden her father disappears and she is left trying to figure out what happened to him, pick up the pieces. She's only like 12 or 13 when this story is taking place, and it's all about self-discovery and figuring out what she wants in her world, and she is battling a dark witch at this point. If the witch can take over her father's realm, then the witch will have all of the power and will lead to some pretty horrific things done to the townspeople. So Clementine has to decide whether she is going to save the people of this realm, or if she is going to be the Dark Lord that everybody expects her to be and that she expects herself to be as well. So overall, I really enjoyed this one. I highly recommend this one. It's such a great Halloween read, and I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. The next prompt was to read a book outside of your comfort zone. I didn't finish this one. I did start this, but I didn't finish it. I decided to read It by Stephen King. Now this book, like, you can lift weights with it. I mean, seriously. This is how far I got. I am on page 300. Not my thing, guys. This book is just not my thing. I can't get into Stephen King's writing. I have been trying, and this story is hella detailed and hella dense, but it just keeps going, and there's so much to it. It's a bit much for me. So if you love Stephen King's writing, that's awesome. It is a great story. I don't know that I will be finishing it. And it's not just because it's outside of my comfort zone. I'm just not enjoying it. After I read the first part of this book, I actually ended up having an anxiety attack. So that was good fun. But yeah, I will probably not be continuing with this book. I might even get rid of it. I haven't decided yet. I'm just not into Stephen King, I don't think, guys. Sorry to disappoint any of you guys out there, but that's apparently how it is. And I don't think I'm going to be reading this one. Or I don't think I'm going to be finishing this one. I did my best. I gave it 300 pages. and the characters haven't even reunited yet. Like, they're still on their way. I don't know. It's taking way too long. So the next prompt that we had was to read a book that BookTube hates. And I read The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. I really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5. And while I do see why certain people disliked it, I still really enjoyed this story. The narrative was beautiful. The imagery in the story, it is so well written, in my opinion. The characters in this story are sassy and are not afraid to be themselves, and I just want to love them all. I do love them all. I do understand why people didn't enjoy this book. The plot is a bit all over the place at times, and for that reason, I can see why people dislike it. However, aside from the up and downness of the plot and the initial understanding of the magic system, this book really was a very fast-paced, action-packed cinnamon roll adventure. It really was. That's all I can describe it as. Not to mention, it is a beautiful book. Like, it is gorgeous. This book really had some amazing rep, and while at times it did stick to the stereotypes, I think that it fit the characters really well, and that those stereotypes played as strengths in the characters. And sometimes in life, stereotypes do happen, and it's really okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that in some cases. Like, you are going to run into that in the real world. So I am a bit bummed that I have to wait a very long time for the sequel to this book, and that the cover hasn't even been revealed yet. And I'm very irritated about that. So if y'all could get on that, that'd be great. Thanks for talking. And then I saw that there was going to be a third book, and that I was going to have to wait till 2021 for that, and I nearly cried. So, help. In all seriousness, guys, I really enjoyed this book, and I highly recommend it. There is a full review in my last video, so feel free to check that one out as well. But overall, like I said, this one got a 4 out of 5. Prompt number 8 was to read a book about something that scares you. And I ended up trying to read After the Woods by Kim Savage. This book, I actually couldn't get through. And part of the reason for that is that it is heavy trigger warnings for abduction and maltreatment. So one of my biggest fears is to be abducted while I'm out running by myself. And that is exactly what happens to the characters in this book. And so it was very intense. And one of the characters comes back, and one of the characters escapes, and she's just beating herself up about it, mentally, emotionally, physically. And she ends up in a very abusive relationship that is also another one of my triggers. And so I did not end up reading this book. I read the first part of it and just drew the line because I knew it wouldn't end very well for me to read this. So as much as I appreciate it, I did not finish this one. But if you have a better stomach for this kind of stuff, then I would recommend it. It is very realistically written. All right, prompt number 9 was to read a sequel with red, orange, or yellow on the cover, and I read To Drink Coffee with a Ghost by Amanda Lovelace. This is the sequel to Make Monsters Out of Girls, which these are both poetry collections that I have fallen in love with. Once again, Amanda Lovelace really can do no wrong for someone as far as poetry goes for me. And this one talks about a damaged relationship with a parent, and how after that parent dies, is it okay to forgive them? And is it okay to forgive a parent for what they've done to you in the past? And it was another very heartfelt one that really kind of gets to you. And I had a great upbringing. I'm not saying I didn't. I had an awesome upbringing, great parents. I was very lucky in that way. But this is still a very, very tough poetry book to read. However, I highly recommend it. I love Amanda Lovelace. Her writing always gets to me, and she is my favorite poet to read. So this book got 5 out of 5. The next prompt number 11, is to read a book while drinking a hot beverage. Now, basically, I read all of these books while drinking a hot beverage, but the one I'm going to put in here is going to be Unwritten by Tara Gilboy. Now, this is a middle grade story that I had on my Kindle and decided to read. It is a little bit of a Halloween feel to it. So this follows a girl and her mother who have spent their time basically running away from things, and only for her to find out that her mother has kidnapped her out of another world. It's a lot like the Hazel would actually, but a bit more of a middle grade feel to it. And so her and one of her best friends ends up, her and this boy end up going back into the storybook world when her mom gets kidnapped. And it's all about how she is to discover who she was in this story and what she ended up doing. And it was a bit dark, but it was all right. I mean, I read this at the beginning of the month, and I just really had a hard time getting into it, unfortunately. And I love middle grade stories. They're usually super fun to read and super easy to get into, but this one just didn't quite make the cut for me, unfortunately. I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5. Prompt number 11 is to read a book in a woodsy environment, or at least with a woodsy cover. And I read Warrior in the Wild by Tricia Levenseller, who I saw live, and so this book is signed. It's so cool. I'm so happy about it. And we got maps. So if you want to see a map of this world, here you go. Isn't that cool? This book follows Rasmira, who is the daughter of the village chief and the only female warrior in her Viking clan. Now, every year, these separate clans make an offering to a god, and this god takes away their food, a woman, and several other aspects, stone, I believe, gold. There's several different aspects that are taken from each village and given to the god. Now, in order for the warriors to become warriors, or the fighters to become warriors, they have to pass a test. And during this test, Rasmira is betrayed by one of her friends, and so she ends up failing the test. It's a lot about familial relationships, and she is sent into the wilds. So she is sent into basically the backcountry of this world, which is ravaged by monsters, and there's creatures that'll eat you. There's all sorts of dangers outside of this world, and each person who is exiled is given a quest. Her quest is to kill the god, which is like impossible, but Rasmira is probably one of the most determined characters I have ever met, and she is so much fun and so feisty. I absolutely loved her. This is her becoming a leader, because while she's out there, she ends up finding 2 boys who have also been exiled. One of them needs to find the head of a sea monster, and the other one needs to get the tail of some very rare bird. And so each of them has to face a fear in order to do this. This book was so much fun. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 because I loved it so much. If you haven't read Tricia Levenseller's writing, I highly recommend it. This was an interesting read also for me because we got a little background from the author when we saw her live last year. And that background basically was her being like, oh yeah, I wanted to write a book about an axe. So she did. I don't know why, but I love that was the inspiration, and the axe was a huge part. This is the main weapon that they use in all of the tribes, and it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed this book, and I cannot recommend it enough. There is a bit of violence, obviously. They are Vikings. Vikings are prone to violence. It's an occupational hazard. And there's a little bit of romance, but it's also the kind of romance that you enjoy. It's the kind of romance that makes you smile. There is also a male-male romance in here, which is the cutest thing in the world. And yeah, I can't get over this. It's a lot about friendship. It's a lot about family. And it's a lot about let's beat the monsters. Read it. 5 out of 5. Prompt number 12 was the penultimate, and it was to read the group book, which was The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. I'm not going to get too much into it, except for my rating was a 3 out of 5, or a 3.5 out of 5. And I'm just going to link the video that we all did together down below, and we'll get into that. And you can watch that one if you want to know what we thought about it. And yeah, so pretty good. I'm going to keep it. Not bad. And finally, we've reached the last prompt. Now, the last prompt for this one is to read a 13th book. Now, I kind of cheated a little bit, and I did read this one at the beginning of this month, though, so it does count. But I have this really bad habit of reading our book of the months like 2 days before we do our videos for our talk-throughs. And my 13th book is going to be Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, which was last month's book. But I did read it. I read it on time. I read it like October 1st. So, oops. Oh well. So I'm counting this one as my 13th book because otherwise I didn't read anything else other than a cookbook, and I'm not counting that. But I did end up reading Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and I really did enjoy this one. I gave it a 4 out of 5, and again, I'll link the video down below if you want to hear more about our thoughts on that. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to comment down below or hit the like button if you enjoyed what you saw today. You can subscribe, hit the bell icon down below to be notified whenever we post new videos, which is Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And starting next month, we will be participating in Bookmas. So we will be doing 24 videos in 24 days. And then we will be done until January. So we have started pre-filming some of those, and after that we will be quite tired. But then we will have new videos up starting in the new year. So, all right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!